On this episode of Militaria at the Museum, we explore the CF-104 ejection seat spurs with pilot Jim Thompson. Then, we delve into the historic spurs of Welsford and Parker from the Battle of Sebastopol. Finally, we reflect on the unmarked legacies at the Royal Navy Burial Ground, paying tribute to those who served. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the Museum. At the Aviation Museum, I'm learning about the CF-104's ejection seat spurs with expert Mark People. We'll examine the intricate details of this life-saving technology. Mark's insights help us understand the importance of this innovation in the high-stakes world of military aviation. Mark, it's always great to get inside one of these cockpits, but I have to say, one of the things I'm interested in is how you get out in the case of an emergency. What would the ejection seat be like in one of these?
Well, Sandy, you're actually sitting on the ejection seat system, and there's a heavy-duty rail system that would literally propel you out of the cockpit of the aircraft. Ejection seats generally work to evacuate the pilot and crew from an aircraft using the ejection seat. That would be probably the only way. Once they're strapped in, they're in for that ride. But I think I've got a little bit of a surprise for you.
Oh, I can't wait to see what that is. What is it we have here in front of us, Jim?
Well, they're known in aviation as spurs, and they're an integral part of the CF-104 ejection sequence. And like the good old cowboys in the West, the spurs are worn on the heels of the boots.
The spur technology was used in Canada's CF-104 Starfighter, and it was used in the Lockheed C2 ejector seat. It was part of the system they used the spurs in that particular aircraft.
Mark, how did the museum end up with these?
Well, these are out of the collection of an ex-RCF pilot, and actually his actual name is actually on the artifact here.
Porter, the name is Rob Porter. He was a lieutenant colonel and a classmate of mine going through Royal Military College. We trained together in Gimli, and down the road he went 104s, I went Voodoos. But these particular shoes helped save his life. He had to eject on a low-level mission in a CF-104. A piece of the wing departed the aircraft. The aircraft rolled. He hesitated slightly and then fired the seat. And fortunately, the aircraft had paused upright, so he escaped.
Oh, that's incredible. So these aren't just any pair of spurs. These are actually used to eject. How would these spurs actually aid you in ejecting from the plane?
One of the considerations on ejection is having limbs flailing as everything is happening around you. These spurs were actually part of the first seat on the 104s. In the early days, the 104 was built as a high-level interceptor, and with the speed, they said, we've got to get the pilot out, but we don't want to eject him upward because he may hit, the CF-104 has a very tall tail. The solution was to eject downwards. So what the spurs do is they're connected to the seat, and when the seat fires, cables pull the stirrups back with your feet in them and clears as the seat goes down the rails. This was fine for aircraft at high altitude, but when we built the CF-104, it ended up being low level. So we had to go to a seat that was going to eject upwards. A pilot getting into the 104 has these on the heels of his boots, and he just steps down into the seat trays where there's a steel ball attached to a cable, and he just clicks in to the back of the spur.
Oh, that's interesting. So you would actually get into the plane wearing these. They wouldn't be something you strapped into once you were on board.
No, well, we used to call the 104 pilots cowboys, and they loved it. And they often, most of them wouldn't take them off all day.
When is it that you sort of know it's time to get out?
When we were told during training, don't save the aircraft, save yourself. Takeoff's probably one of the most dangerous places, and landing is the other. And you should have in your mind on takeoff, if something happens, if you lose your engine, if you have the tire blows, if you lose control of the aircraft, you know your seat will be able to get you out of there. So you have to make the decision early, and you've always got to have that in your mind. When and where would I bail out and do that? So I think it's being aware and always thinking, I'll eject first and worry about other things later.
Jim, have you personally ever had to eject from an aircraft?
Thank goodness, no. But part of going through basic training on the Tudor, for example, we had to practice the ejections as a matter of course. And the instructors would look at us and make sure that we did pull our heels back, that we did pull our elbows in, and stay that and get the head back. But it's just getting in the position and ejecting when you should be ejecting and not waiting.
Right. When would the 104 have been being used, and what was its primary purpose?
Ultimately, the 104 was used by Canada from about 1962 right through to about 1984. The last ones were flying at that point. Designed as a high-level interceptor, but that role sort of changed when Canada purchased them because they needed to enable them to deploy nuclear weapons in Europe, and that was a sort of a low-level environment that was used for that. Very dangerous, and there was a high level of losses throughout the course. I think 112 Canadian starfighters were lost over the course of that service period. Basically, when you climb aboard a jet fighter like the CF-104, you're strapping yourself into that aircraft to be part of it. Almost you're just becoming part of the machine. And the ejection seat obviously is going to get you out in trouble, but it also keeps you in the aircraft as well too. You're basically relying on that seat to get you out if anything goes wrong. Issue behind it is finding the way to get out safely. There's a safety crew that are involved in servicing the seats. The charges have to be timed out on them. They have to pull the charges at certain points. Because again, essentially it's armed. When it's sitting in an aircraft, it's sitting there with pins in. You get into the aircraft, you pull the pins, and you're armed. That's ready to go. So you've got explosives, you've got complex harnesses, you've got all the maintenance and wear and tear on those as well. So it's a fairly complex piece of gear involved just in getting the aircraft flying.
So there's a lot of room for user error in this sort of thing.
Well, I would say more so than not, and I think that's the biggest thing is that it's, you're obviously when you're flying military aircraft, you're part of that entire organization and system, and you need the support of all the technicians and the crew to make it work. And then when you actually take that aircraft up, the responsibility is squarely in your hands. So.
Jim, thank you for coming in today. It's been great to be able to talk through the innovation behind the ejection technology and talk to someone who's actually strapped on these spurs.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly appreciate it.
And Mark, thank you for making this all happen.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to bring another story and bring the context of actually what this artifact is and the connection, obviously, Jim has with the pilot that wore these.
Absolutely. When we return, I'll share the courageous stories of Major Welsford and Captain Parker, two Nova Scotian heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice during the Crimean War. At the Army Museum, I'm joining expert Kevin Robbins as he takes me through the compelling stories of Parker and Welsford. We'll explore how their leadership was instrumental in this conflict and why their actions left a lasting legacy on the battlefield. What would seeing a pair of spurs during the Crimean War tell me?
Well, have you ever heard the expression to earn your spurs?
I certainly have.
Well, in regard to an officer in an infantry regiment, it would only be officers that would have spurs.
And is that because they would be the only ones with the privilege of having a horse?
Exactly.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Unless you're in the cav, then everyone has spurs.
Right. Kevin, what can you tell me about Parker, the man to whom these spurs belonged?
Captain Parker was born in Lawrencetown, son of Nova Scotia, enlisted, like many of his peers in the 18th and 19th century in a British regiment, prior to Confederation, of course, and was remarkably brave member of the infantry. He spent 12 years with the Roshar bus, with the 78th, most of it in India. So he was a fairly seasoned campaigner and had only been with the 77th Regiment a short time, a matter of months, when he's transferred to them and when they go to the Crimea.
What would Parker's involvement have been with the Crimean War?
He's a serving officer with a regiment of the line, the 77th Regiment of Foot, at Sebastopol, where the British will lay siege to the sort of Russian stronghold, which has become the headquarters for the Black Sea Fleet. He is, on a daily basis, part of the rotation of troops that come in and out of the trenches. The infantry, on a regular basis, help dig trenches and maintain field fortifications. So he would be a very busy individual throughout the time of his being in the trenches in front of Sebastopol during the siege. During the siege of Sebastopol, the main sort of defensive work that the Russians have across from the British lines, it's called Bastion Number 3, or the Great Redan. So the British, over the course of the siege in front of the city, they mount 3 assaults on the Great Redan. Parker is killed in the final assault on the Great Redan, the 3rd assault. So he and his troops actually make it up into the Redan, but again, the fire from the Russians is overwhelming. Parker was seen after being shot once on the ascent into the Redan. He'd already been wounded, but he's trying to slow the movement of his troops, who are kind of like very rapidly going back out of the embrasures. So he is found later, as they would say, his body's riddled with bullets. Just a week or so before his death in front of the Great Redan, he and a brother officer were taking troops from the 77th from their company, and they're moving into forward areas of the siege lines outside Sebastopol. Russian troops can see that there is a movement, so they mount a sortie. Parker uses his revolver and drops 3 of these fellows. So with that, he is the only one to get out of that trench line. He does not want to leave his friend's body in the sap, so he hoisted him up over the shoulder, and then he makes his way out of the trench. That is what he was given the recommendation for a VC for. So this is prior to the 3rd and last great assault on the Great Redan.
And with Parker dying at Sebastopol, how did these make their way back?
So his effects would have been back in his tent. So these would have been likely in a campaign chest. So when he dies, his body is later, and to this day, is interned in the British cemetery for the Crimean War dead outside Sebastopol. So these would have been in his trunk. So his personal effects would have been sent back to Halifax. And in 1898, one of Parker's nephews, who had been the custodian of these, donates these to the Nova Scotia Museum in its fledgling time period. So again, you can see by the tag there as well, that's written by the first curator of the Nova Scotia Museum, Mr. Harry Pearce. You can always pick out an officer in those early photographs, one by their uniforms and the presence of swords and the presence of spurs. Now, at Sebastopol, because it's a siege and it's such a god-awful place, and you're serving in trenches, and not many officers are moving around on horseback on a daily basis. They take their spurs off and they put them away in their campaign chest.
Oh, that's fascinating. So they wouldn't have been with him when he died. They would have been back at his tent waiting for his return.
Exactly. He wouldn't have been wearing them, no. And again, you can see this. I made a point of checking this out because I looked at a dozen photographs of, and again, the Crimean War is the first time you'll see photography recording a campaign or a war. And all the officers have their spurs off. Again, you can just imagine like walking through the mud and the debris of a siege area. You're not using a horse at that time, so the spurs are just one last thing to kind of trip you up.
Kevin, I've been to the monument which features Parker and also a Welsford. What can you tell me about him?
Welsford is, again, born here in Halifax. Again, spends the majority of his life as a professional soldier serving in the British Army. And again, finds himself in 1855 in the lines with the 97th Regiment of Foot. Welsford is in charge of what they call the ladder party. So he's in command of 360 men from his regiment. 160 of these men are carrying ladders, 8 men to a ladder section, and then a storming party of 200. Literally, when they crossed that ground for the British lines to get up to the Great Redan, British casualties that day there are 1,500 British casualties. Once those ladders are in place, he is the first one up a ladder. The Russian gun crew that is there set off a gun. He is killed, and his body greatly maimed. And despite those efforts, that is not a successful endeavor.
So fascinating, though, that these two men from Nova Scotia would both meet their end in the Crimea that day. You know.
On the same day.
Yeah.
Again, it takes us back to this aspect of how Halifax was very much a British town at that time, and growing up in a garrisoned town like Halifax.
Kevin, thank you very much for pulling these out of the archives for me to look at today. It's been fascinating to go over the story of these two brave Nova Scotians who met their fate so far from home, but also to understand better the reasons for which spurs were worn and the symbolism behind them.
Glad you enjoyed it, and I hope the folks at home do as well. And again, this is an important part of our early Canadian history in the city and in the world at large.
Certainly is.
Thanks for coming.
Coming up next, we'll explore the history of the Royal Navy Burial Ground, a hidden part of Halifax's Navy history that holds the untold stories of sailors and workers who served far from home. At the Navy Museum, expert Lisa McNiven is showing me the history of a rarely seen Royal Navy burial ground. This site honors the unmarked legacy of hundreds of sailors, ensuring their contributions will not be lost in history.
I've driven by the burial ground here countless times, but I have to say I didn't realize just how extensive it is.
It is. No one knows that that grassy knoll has at least 1,400 souls buried there.
Really?
It's a little piece of forgotten history that I don't think a lot of people know about. I was actually going through my maps last week and I came across a reproduction of a map from 1860 on the outline of what the burial ground must have looked like.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Should I bring it out to the main table and we can look at it?
That would be excellent.
Okay.
We know there are about 1,400 graves at the burial ground. Do we know who these people were?
We do. Mostly naval. There is a small portion there that are civilian-based, but these are sailors that are coming into Halifax. 1759, the naval base is established here in Halifax, and in 1783, the need for a naval hospital is established. 20 acres is bought, and incorporated into the hospital is also the burial ground.
Right, and do we have any way of sort of going back and understanding who these are that would be in the unmarked graves and when they would date to?
So what we've based our information on so far are the grave markers and the information we've been able to glean from them. Headstones, rubbings, also going back to Admiralty records and Kew Gardens. But the unmarked graves are more of a mystery. A lot of people don't know that there is a large population of the civilian families that are buried here. So they require a little extra research, but it's very rewarding to be able to create this type of genealogy. My assumption is if you didn't have the finances, you were not given a marker and you were not given a coffin and you were simply put into the ground.
So it's not always a case of the grave markers having been lost or the records having been lost. Sometimes it simply was not recorded and not marked to begin with.
Absolutely.
Lisa, if one is researching the graveyard, where would these records be found?
So we have had researchers in Kew Gardens in London, Admiralty records. They are going through the records of ships that have been lost, the documentation of where if there was a death, if there was disease. We're taking the records from there. We're taking from the records of what we are reading on headstones. But there were no official records until 1871.
Really? It was that late?
That late.
So what exactly is this map telling us?
This map indicates it's a reproduction of a map around 1860 coming from London, Admiralty records, and it represents the stones size. Some of these are cenotaphs, some of these are memorials, some of these are markers, and some of these are actual burial sites. We're looking at this record and correlating the names that we do have and doing a genealogical research and being able to build more on the foundation of who is actually buried here and what they were doing here.
The graves shown here, this is quite a far cry from 1400.
So this map is not complete. 1860, the last known burial is 1901. So these graves indicate known stones. So this is an estimation.
And tell me, Lisa, out of all the burials that we know of and that are marked, are there any that particularly stand out to you?
I'm quite excited about a new addition that I have discovered called Mr. Frederick Augustus Paris.
Right.
His story is absolutely fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to doing more research on him.
Do you think we could go see that?
I'd love to show it to you.
That would be great. This looks really different, Lisa. I'm quite struck by how few grave markers there are.
Unfortunately, this doesn't reflect the image that I just showed you back in Admiralty House. This is the result of the devastation of the Halifax explosion.
Really?
It is.
You can really sort of see how the loss of gravestones follows the path of the explosion.
Absolutely. You can almost picture a wave going across, devastating this area, but at least saving some of the stones towards the end.
Tell me more about Frederick Augustus Paris.
I am so excited about the research that I'm doing on this gentleman right here. He is giving me a wealth of information. So, as far as I know, but I may not be correct, he is our only Black Caribbean British sailor buried here.
Really?
Going through research, Paris is actually a name from Barbados. I contacted the Barbados Genealogical Society, and they provided me with his birth certificate, and I was able to trace his service from around 1855 to his service in the British Navy, coming to Halifax. He's on a ship. The ship ends its commission here, and he becomes the Halifax dockyard blacksmith.
Really? Isn't that fascinating?
It is.
Is it unusual to be able to find that extensive a record of someone's life?
I enjoy the research. So if there's a name that isn't sounding familiar to me, I go down the road, and he has provided me with so much information. I'm so pleased I found him.
Is this the first time that you've really dug in depth into someone buried in the graveyard, Lisa?
I tend to do more genealogical reference to families that are here, but Mr. Paris just appealed to me, and I found out so much information. He actually marries a lady from Barbados about 3 years prior to his death, and he's living on Garish Street. And they list his occupation as being a blacksmith in the dockyard here.
How old was Mr. Paris when he died in 1898?
He was in his mid-40s, and unfortunately, he dies from tuberculosis. According to his records through the Admiralty source, he had been suffering from tuberculosis for quite a while.
That's interesting, and that sort of speaks to how detailed the records are surrounding his life, that we even have his cause of death.
Yes, and knowing that he's here, that propels me to go on and do more research. Where there's one Mr. Paris, maybe there's more.
Lisa, thank you very much for walking me through the story of Mr. Paris and allowing me to explore the graveyard here at the base. It's been wonderful to see that there are some records that are still so complete, and it makes me really curious about the rest of the stories of the people here that have simply been lost to time.
Absolutely, there's more to discover. All the souls that are buried here deserve to have their story retold. They've had their life has passed, but through a little research, a little care, we can retell their stories and we can remember them again for their service.
Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best-kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.